You know that sound a log makes in a fireplace when it suddenly splits? That sharp, popping crackle. Most people find it cozy, I guess. For me, it's the sound of a connection breaking. It throws me right back every single time. That and the hiss of radio static or the specific ring of an old landline phone in a movie. It's pathetic, I know. I'm a librarian in a town so small we still have a physical card catalog, and a sound can send me into a full-blown panic attack, right there between the history and biography sections. My name is Frank, and I used to be a 911 dispatcher. I was good at it, too. 15 years of chaos, tragedy, and the endless, stupid things people do to each other. I thought I'd built up an immunity. I could listen to a man describing a car wreck that killed his family and calmly dispatch an ambulance while my heart rate stayed at a steady 70. I was a rock, but a rock can be shattered. It's been 3 years since I took my last call, the one that ended my career, my marriage, and my ability to sleep through the night. I'm writing this down, I think, because I need someone else to know it happened. I need to prove to myself that I'm not crazy, even though the story I'm about to tell you sounds like the ravings of a madman. It was a call that came from nowhere. A call from a place my computer said didn't exist. A call from a time that had already passed. It was a Tuesday night in October, deep in the belly of the week where time seems to stretch and thin out. The air in the dispatch center was thick and stale. A recycled soup of burnt coffee, industrial cleaner, and the low-grade anxiety that seeped from the walls. The hum of the server racks in the back room was a constant, low-frequency drone, a white noise machine for the damned. The giant bank of screens in front of us cast a cold, blue glow on our faces, making us all look like ghosts tethered to our machines. My headset was a permanent fixture, an extension of my own skull, its cheap foam earpiece worn smooth and slightly greasy from years of pressure. On my left, Janice was patiently talking a woman down who was convinced her neighbor's wind chimes were, and I quote, singing in a demonic key. Janice put her on a brief hold, caught my eye, and rolled her eyes in a slow, dramatic circle. It was the universal signal for another one. On my right, Dave was snoring softly, a skill he'd perfected for the lulls between midnight and 4 a.m., his head bobbing in perfect time with the blinking server lights. The calls trickled in, a slow drip of human fallibility. A fender bender on the interstate where the biggest injury was a bruised ego, the aforementioned demonic wind chimes. A false alarm from a security system at a closed-down strip mall. This was the job 99% of the time. Not a heart-pounding thriller, but a monotonous grind of human error and minor misfortune. I was running on autopilot, my responses practiced and detached. Okay, sir, can you confirm your location? Ma'am, are you in a safe place? The words came out of my mouth, but my mind was a million miles away. I was thinking about the leaky faucet I needed to fix, about how I'd missed my daughter Chloe's bedtime story again for a shift that so far felt utterly meaningless. The guilt was a familiar, dull ache behind my ribs. I remember staring at a hairline crack in my plastic coffee mug, thinking that it probably had more personality than I did at that moment. The line was flat, my emotional EKG was a dead, straight, predictable line. This wasn't a job anymore, it was a rhythm, and I had forgotten the melody. Then the line lit up. Not with the crisp, digital chime of a modern cell call, but with a strange, almost hesitant flicker on my screen. I clicked to accept. 911, what's your emergency? The first thing that hit me was the static. It wasn't the clean, empty hiss of a bad cell connection. It was a thick, organic crackling like dry leaves being crushed underfoot, or I thought with a grimace, like that fireplace log splitting apart. It was an analog sound in a digital world. Underneath it, a voice, a girl. She sounded young, maybe late teens, and her words were small, tight knots of pure terror. Please, please, you have to help me. He's in the house. My training kicked in, a lifetime of drilled responses shoving the burnout aside. Okay, ma'am, stay on the line with me. My name is Frank, can you tell me your name? Clara, she whispered, her voice trembling so hard the word almost vibrated. My name is Clara, I'm in the closet. In my parents' bedroom, I think he heard me come in. Okay, Clara, you're doing great. You're hidden, you're on the phone with me, I need your address. Where are you? This is where the straight line of my night began to curve into a question mark. She gave me a street name, Old Mill Road, and a description. It's the white farmhouse, she said, her breathing shallow and fast, punctuated by the rustle of what sounded like clothes. Just past the old grist mill, the one with the broken water wheel. Everyone knows it. I typed Old Mill Road into my system. Nothing. The cursor blinked mockingly on the empty search field. I tried variations. Mill Road, Old Mill Lane, 0 results. My map, a constantly updated satellite feed that could pinpoint a specific car in a parking lot, showed nothing but dense, black forest in the area she was vaguely describing, miles outside the official county line. A digital void. Clara, I'm not finding that address in my system, I said, trying to keep my voice calm, a smooth, level surface for her to stand on. Is there a town name? Across street, anything you can see from a window. A window? No, I can't. I'm in the closet. The door has slats. I can just peek. Her voice trailed off, and I heard a muffled sob. Town? She sounded confused, as if it were the dumbest question in the world. We're just outside of Rockbridge, the hardware store, the one with the big red sign. We're just behind there. Rockbridge? I knew Rockbridge. I'd driven through it dozens of times. The hardware store she mentioned, the one with the big red sign, it had been torn down 15, maybe 20 years ago to make way for a highway overpass. It was a local landmark that now only existed in the memories of people my parents' age. My first thought was a prank, a very elaborate, cruel prank by some local history buff. But the fear in her voice, it was too raw, too genuine. I've heard hundreds of people pretending to be scared for a dare or for attention. This wasn't one of them. This was the real thing. I could hear her heart beating through the phone line, a frantic, desperate drum against the backdrop of that strange, persistent static. My professional detachment was cracking, flaking away like old paint. This wasn't a standard call. This was a puzzle, and the pieces felt all wrong in my hands. I wasn't just confused, I was starting to feel deeply, profoundly unsettled. I leaned forward, pressing the headset tighter against my ear, trying to filter out the hum of the dispatch center and sink completely into her world of static and terror. My own breathing sounded loud and ragged in my ears. Okay, Clara, just stay with me. Let's try something else. What day is it today, just to get our bearings? It was a standard question we used to assess a caller's mental state, to check for disorientation after a trauma or during a medical episode. A simple anchor in reality. Her answer was what broke reality. She didn't hesitate. Through a choked sob, she said, "It's Thursday, October 26th. My blood went cold. A glacial chill spread from the base of my spine all the way up to my scalp. It was a Tuesday in 2021. I stared at the digital calendar display in the corner of my monitor. Tuesday, October 26, 2021. The day of the week was wrong, but the date was an impossible match. My mind scrambled, trying to find a rational explanation. A brain injury, drugs, but her details had been so specific, so clear. Clara, I said, my own voice suddenly feeling foreign and thin, a stranger's voice in my own throat. What year is it? There was a pause. The static on the line seemed to swell, to grow louder and more complex, as if it were eating the silence. In the background, on her end, I heard something new. Faint, tinny music. It was a song I vaguely recognized, but from where? One of those golden oldies stations my dad listened to in his garage. The Bee Gees, maybe. Something from a whole different era of sound. What kind of question is that? She asked, her fear momentarily replaced by a flicker of genuine, bewildered irritation. It's 1978. Please, can you just send someone? He's walking around downstairs. I can hear the floorboards. 1978. The number didn't just hang in the air between us. It landed in the center of my chest like a block of ice. It wasn't a mistake, it wasn't a prank. The chilling certainty of it washed over me, a wave of absolute cold. The non-existent road, the demolished hardware store, the old-fashioned music, the analog quality of the call itself. It all clicked into place with a horrifying, perfect, impossible logic. This wasn't a girl who was lost in space. She was lost in time. The floor seemed to drop out from under my rolling chair. My training, my 15 years of experience, all of it evaporated in an instant. It was a manual for a world that no longer applied. There was no protocol for this. There was no button I could press, no cavalry I could send. I was connected to a ghost. A ghost who didn't know she was dead yet. The music on her end was suddenly cut off by the sound of a heavy footstep on a creaking floorboard, much closer this time, just outside the bedroom door. A man's voice, deep and guttural and slurred with what sounded like anger or alcohol, called out a name that wasn't Clara. "Nancy, you in here, girl. Don't you hide from me." Clara gasped, a tiny, sharp sound she tried to swallow but couldn't. The terror was back, 100 times stronger, a palpable force I could feel through the wire. And for the first time in my career, I felt it with her. Not sympathy, not professional concern, but pure, undiluted, ice-cold fear. I wasn't a dispatcher anymore. I was just a man on a telephone, listening to a murder that had already happened 43 years ago. My world narrowed to the sound of her breathing. Every hitched, terrified gasp was a drumbeat counting down to a conclusion I already knew. The core of my job, the very reason for my existence in that chair, was to be a bridge between crisis and help. But the bridge was out. It had washed away in a flood of years, and I was stranded on one side, a helpless listener. The tension in the room, my room, was unbearable. Janice was staring at me, her own call finished, her brow furrowed with concern. I must have looked like I'd seen a ghost, and in a way I had. Clara, listen to me, I whispered, my voice urgent, desperate. Don't make a sound, don't even breathe. What else could I say? What help could I possibly offer? I was a god with no power, a witness across an ocean of time. My fingers flew across my secondary keyboard, a frantic, useless dance. I opened a web browser. Rockbridge Missing Persons 1978, Rockbridge Unsolved Crimes. The search results were slow, clunky, buried under decades of digital noise. It was like trying to find a specific grain of sand in a hurricane. Through the static, I heard the squeal of a doorknob turning slowly. Clara's breath caught in her throat, a sound I will never forget. It was the sound of hope dying. He's opening the door, she whimpered, so softly I could barely hear her. He's in the room. I could hear him now too, heavy, shuffling footsteps on a wood floor. A drawer being pulled open, its contents rummaged through with angry swipes. A grunt, then silence, a long, drawn-out silence that was worse than any noise. I'm going to die, she whispered. It wasn't a question, it was a statement of fact. No, no, you're not, Clara, just stay quiet, I pleaded, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. I was lying to a dead girl. It was the cruelest and most pointless lie I had ever told. Then, the sound that haunts my waking moments and fuels my nightmares. The scrape of the closet door against the floor as it was pulled open. A short, sharp, piercing scream from Clara, a man's voice thick with rage shouting, "There you are." The sickening, wet thud of something heavy hitting something soft, once, twice, and then nothing. No, not nothing, the line was still open, the static was still there, but underneath it there was a new sound, a low, guttural curse from the man. And then the click and hiss of the phone being placed back on its cradle. The connection was severed. The line went dead, leaving me in the cold, sterile silence of my own time. I sat there, frozen. The dead air on the line was screaming at me. My screen glowed with the final, mocking status of the call. Source unknown, call terminated. I ripped the headset off, my hands shaking so violently I almost threw it across the room. The mundane sounds of the dispatch center rushed back in Dave's gentle snoring. The clatter of another dispatcher's keyboard, the hum of the coffee maker, and they all sounded alien, like sounds from a different planet. Frank, what the hell was that? Janice was standing beside my station, her face pale. You look like you're about to vomit. I couldn't form words. I just stared at my screen at the ghost of that call. My supervisor, a portly man named Henderson with a face permanently etched with mild disappointment, ambled over. He looked at my screen at the lack of data and clapped me on the shoulder with a heavy, patronizing hand. Tough one, huh? Some real sickos out there. Probably some kids with a soundboard and too much time on their hands. Go take a break, walk it off. A soundboard, he thought it was a prank. I wanted to scream at him, to grab him by the collar and tell him what I'd heard, what I'd experienced. But how could I? Hey Henderson, I just took a call from 1978. A girl was murdered. Yeah, I'm fine, just a little shaken up. They would have put me on administrative leave and sent me straight to a shrink. I didn't sleep for the next 3 days. The call replayed in my head on a continuous, torturous loop. On my next day off, I did the only thing I could think of. I got in my car and drove. I drove for 2 hours out past the county line to the general area Clara had described. I found what was left of Rockbridge. It was barely a town, just a crossroads with a gas station and a church. I asked the old man behind the counter about a white farmhouse near an old mill. He just shook his head. My last stop was the local library. It was a small, dusty building that smelled of decaying paper and forgotten stories. And there, in their archives, hunched over a clunky microfilm reader, I found it. I scrolled through the local paper from late October 1978, my heart pounding with a mixture of dread and a desperate need for validation. And then I saw it. A small article buried on page 4 of the October 27th edition. The headline was simple, Fire AT Derelict Farmhouse. The text was brief. Firefighters had been called to a blaze at an abandoned property off an old service road. After extinguishing the fire, they discovered human remains. The body was burned beyond recognition, but dental records later identified the victim as a teenage runaway named Clara Jensen. The article ended with a single chilling line. Police suspect foul play but have no leads at this time. Clara Jensen, the name hit me like a physical blow. I leaned back from the reader, a strangled sob escaping my throat. It was real, all of it. I wasn't crazy, I had been a witness. I had heard the last moments of her life and I couldn't do a single thing to help her. I had found the truth, but the cost was my sanity. The foundation of my world had been shattered, and I knew, sitting there in that dusty library, that I could never go back. I could never put on that headset again. The rock was broken, and all the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put Frank back together again. Edit 1. I'm reading through the comments, and thank you, everyone. It helps, it really does. A few of you are asking the same question, and it's something that's kept me up at night for 3 years. The police report, the investigation, here's the part that really messes me up. I went deeper. After I quit my job, I had a lot of time on my hands, too much time, I became obsessed. I spent weeks in that library's archives, and I even filed a request for the declassified case file, citing academic research. It took months, but I got it. Most of it was useless. The farmhouse was a total loss. No fingerprints, no weapon. It was a dead end, a cold case gathering dust in a box. But there was one detail in the fire marshal's report that wasn't in the newspaper. They found the melted remains of a small, portable radio near the body. It was described as unusual for the time, a modified piece of equipment with extra wiring and what looked like a crude, oversized antenna. The investigator noted it down as just a peculiar belonging of the victim, but I remembered the music, the Bee Gees cutting out, and just before the line went dead after the thuds, after the man's curse, I heard something else. I didn't mention it before because I thought I was imagining it, that my mind was just filling in the blanks with horror. But the radio report made it real. It was a man's voice, not shouting, but speaking in a low, clear tone right into the microphone of that radio. And what he said was, "No one will ever find you." He wasn't talking to Clara. He was talking to the future. He was talking to me.